Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about one key part of Doctor Strange's massive Multiverse of Madness upgrade that's kind of broken, maybe not. Let's find out. And it's not his uniform, thankfully, but it is his artifact, unfortunately. So if you did pick up his artifact, or if you got it by chance, or if you were thinking about getting it, saving up for it, hopefully this video's testing will shed more light on one of the most confusing but yet spicy artifacts we've ever seen, because it's tied into his chance to time freeze, which is a really interesting mechanic. And of course, it's the signature mechanic of Doctor Strange, owning the Eye of Agamotto and the Time Stone within. But the tricky part is he doesn't have a guaranteed chance to time freeze, and then even when he time freezes, it's only a 15% chance for it to activate. Well, what happens when it activates? Well, he gets a massive buff. He gets iframe ignore, he gets an attack buff, and he gets a dodge all attacks buff. So it's basically everything plus the cat. It's really dope, but it's leaving myself and other content creators and other players really confused, because it doesn't seem to trigger appropriately in different content. And when you look at it, at least on paper, it seems like it shouldn't work at all in World Boss Legend, because you can't time freeze. You can't apply the time freeze effect to Knull or Mephisto or Ultron. And in other content, you can sort of apply it. So should it work? Does it work? Doesn't it? Let's try to figure that out. So what you're going to want to look for in all of the content that I'm going to showcase is in the upper left-hand corner. I'm not going to zoom in on it in all of the content, but I'll zoom in on it now against Cull Obsidian so you know exactly what to look for. It's the all the way to the right, but -1 from the top row. Doctor Strange has 2 rows of buffs, and it's not the one here on the artifact skill, but it's actually that one just before it, sandwiched between the green and yellow icons. And that icon, you're going to wait and sort of hope to see it light up orange. When it lights up orange, that means the artifact ability has activated. So as you can see, thus far, we've activated our skills. We've gone through our different rotation. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 skills. We've done auto attack even, and nothing has oh, there we go. It just somehow triggered its effect. I'm not exactly sure how, but here's the news. The only way I can actually get this to trigger successfully consistently is when I pop his tier 3 skill, because that will trigger sort of an undodgeable time freeze, and it actually triggers twice, which is pretty cool because his tier 3 skill lasts so long. So there you can actually see it triggering twice, but otherwise there's basically a close to 0% chance that it's going to trigger with a regular attack, whether it's a regular skill or an auto attack. So in that fight, as slow as I took it with no supports and no strikers or anything, I basically was able to trigger it twice, and on one skill, which is his 6th skill, that went the entire time. Okay, but what about other content? Again, something like World Boss Legend, and keep in mind that all World Boss Legends are going to have essentially the same construct defensively. You're basically out of luck completely. In this case, Doctor Strange has 4 rows of buffs, so you still are looking at that top row worth of buffs, but you're actually looking at the buff. Oh, it actually did trigger. That's super duper weird. How did that buff trigger? Did they change it? Oh, it's actually triggering even though the time freeze effect. What? This makes no sense. You can't apply the time freeze buff to Knull. So how is this triggering? I don't know. Let's continue our testing and see what happens, because this is not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting it to not trigger once versus Knull, but I've actually already seen it trigger twice. Oh, there we go. It triggers there. What is going on? This is so bizarre. Is it going to trigger again in 5 seconds? Let's see what happens here. No, it doesn't. Huh. But it definitely does seem to trigger. This is very weird. Huh. So it's a bit misleading in the sense that you'd expect it to only trigger when you can actually physically freeze the boss, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Yeah, it just triggered there again. I just saw the timer expiring, which means it had triggered. No way. It is pretty inconsistent, though. Interesting. And you can see that the time freeze immunity, that time freeze immunity text just triggers massively. Huh. So there may be more to this than I initially thought. This is worth doing a deep dive for. Maybe it's just specifically Knull that allows you to activate it and not Mephisto. Or does this apply to all of the boss legends equally? Okay, so 2 rotations in and we haven't seen the artifact trigger once. We are now going to use our tier 3 skill. Still no trigger. Okay, he moved out of the tier 3 skill range. Don't mind my rotation or my playstyle. It's not perfect. It's not good at all. I hate a mighty CTP of destruction on Doctor Strange, in case you're wondering. I'm just doing this to test, not for the sake of... There, it finally triggered. This is so bizarre. What is going on? Why did it trigger there on that tier 3, but not on the other tier 3? Right? There it triggered again. What exactly am I doing differently? Like, I don't know if I can figure this out, guys. I honestly don't know if I can figure this out at all. What am I doing differently? From there it triggered again. From one run to another. Is it a specific skill that I'm pressing, or that's a certain skill is happening at the same time as the tier 3? Like, we might need the devs to weigh in on this, because I don't know if I have not only the knowledge, but just the ability to analyze the game as it's happening to figure this out. I mean, he's flying through this stage, by the way, with no strikers. But I'm trying to figure out where the consistency is here. Okay, it seems pretty consistent on the tier 3. Okay, I don't want to die, because then we can't test it at all. It does seem pretty consistent on the tier 3. The auto attack isn't doing much for me. What if I don't use the tier 3? Okay, hang on. What if I don't use the tier 3? Will that make it so that it never triggers? Let's see. Okay, if I'm ever going to be able to attack him again, we will know. Okay, maybe it's tied to the tier 3 then, which is what I originally thought, right? But we've also seen it, I think I've seen it trigger without the tier 3. Maybe that was just in my dreams? There, see, that's the animation for the time freeze on the ground, but he's not affected by the time freeze. Yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to time freeze him. Let's see if we pop the tier 3, if we can time freeze him. Oh, yeah, it happened. Yeah. So that's really weird, huh? Let me see if this pans out in other content. All right, what about ABX? Again, the team doesn't really matter here. There we go. It triggers right away because you can see the Frost Beast is time frozen. I'll also probably be able to time freeze him with just my auto attack, and we can test this here. Oh, it's on auto play. I got to turn that off. Oh, there I time froze him and nothing triggered. What? Let me see if I can do that again. Wow. Okay, there it triggered. Okay, so I can time freeze him with basically all of my skills, which means that, yeah, this has nothing to do with, well, I mean, it has, you know, there's no negative. Okay, it seems to be pretty consistent. There's a 5-second cooldown after it triggers, so you do have to sort of give it a bit of time to come back around after it had triggered, but there he's going to dodge it because of the jump. But then as soon as we pop this, yep, we should be able to then send him back into artifact land. Okay, so it does work in ABX. Cool. All right, so there isn't much time left, but with just Searcher and I here, can I time freeze him? And then furthermore, can I hit the activation rate, which is not 100%, when I time freeze in order to get... Yes, I can. I can do it, at least with the tier 3 skill. I don't believe that I can do it with any of his other abilities, but I guess that is sort of the price you pay as the Sorcerer Supreme to have access to such powerful magic. So it does seem to me that there is a confusion and there's a bit of a mystery involved with Doctor Strange's artifact triggering against some bosses that otherwise, well, cannot be time frozen, but it still does affect them. And so it's pretty tricky because the activation chance, there's only a 75% chance to trigger the time freeze, right? That's what it says. There's 75% chance when attacking to apply the time freeze, and it's a 4-second effect with a 12-second cooldown. So you have to manage that expectation with the additional expectation that when you hit the time freeze, it only has a 15 or whatever 20% chance to activate. It's a 15% plus your total instinct times 0.4%, so it's probably like 16% chance, something like that. So the chance to trigger there is not 100%, which I think is what's leading some players, some content creators, to experiment and find that they basically can never trigger it, which is maybe down to just a string of bad luck. You definitely can't time freeze Knull and Mephisto as World Boss Legends, but we did see the artifact activating against both of them, so it does seem to ignore that general idea that we sort of think about when it comes to other abilities activating based on certain effects, like for example bleed procs and sort of bleed abilities that Blade and Baron Zemo have that only activate when a bleed is applied, but because you can't apply bleeds to World Boss Ultimates or World Boss Legends, it never works. This does not seem to be the case with Doctor Strange's artifact, which does give me hope for future artifacts that will tag onto other abilities besides time freeze, like webbing or shock or bleed, like I just mentioned. It also makes this artifact a bit better, but also a bit underwhelming because of that low activation rate. So I mean, if I were the devs, I would probably bump that activation rate chance to like 50%, because again, it's a 50% chance to trigger the artifact's effect when you trigger the time freeze. So you can still miss that time freeze for 4 full seconds and then have to wait 8 seconds to try again. It's unlikely given the number of hits on Doctor Strange's skills, but it probably means that if you have his artifact on him and you want to trigger the effect, you probably don't ever want to cancel the tier 3. And there are some playstyles now with Doctor Strange where you just cancel the tier 3 for the buffs, for the frenzy buff, and just go right back into the 5-4-3, 5-4-1-2-3 combo. So it actually adds a layer of complexity that I like for the character, but I would like to see this artifact be a bit more consistent, because some players forked over a lot of money to get this artifact in a 5-star or 6-star version, myself included, and to see it sort of kind of work but be so inconsistent that you can basically never rely on it is kind of yikes. And that's not even touching on PvP. With PvP, it's even more difficult because of debuff immunity. Now, the debuff immunity thing and the recent introduction of things that ignore the debuff immunity, like Spider-Man's 4th skill specifically with this uniform, where it, ignores immunity and just goes right through your debuff immunity or debuff effect or whatever you have it, gives me hope. Makes me speculate, gives me hope that there could be a synergy Doctor Strange uniform that's much more PvP focused and that has a time freeze ignore immunity effect, because that would probably make it much more consistent to trigger this artifact. And to be honest, 66% of this artifact's effects are PvP effects, right? Ignore iframe, ignore targeting, ignore iframe buff is a PvP, generally PvP buff. And then the last one, the chance to dodge attacks, is also a PvP buff akin to Spider-Man and Echo's artifact. So that's sort of what leads me to believe that there's going to be a Doctor Strange synergy uniform. It also makes sense if you've seen all the trailers or if you've seen the movie by now that, there's multiple versions of Doctor Strange. It's literally called multiverse. So why wouldn't the devs pull that lever and cash in on that multiverse and throw some multiverse uniforms at us? But we'll have to wait and see. So it's sort of a cautious tale of being the first adopters of new in-game items. It can sometimes work in your favor, and it can sometimes be something that just puzzles you. And basically, that's what it's been for this video. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of multiversal magic. Do you think it was worth me choosing in my 5-star selector, or should I have gone with a more surefire bet? I'm still unsure, but at the same time, I'm happy that I invested in Doctor Strange just because I always loved the character and I always will. And even if he's not meta, I'm glad that I have sort of, as you can say, a complete build on him with all of the boxes sort of full, right? Nothing is missing in terms of like ISO, Uru, Obelisk, Artifact, etc. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your testing showed, if anything, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.